Hey, I'm Amadeus, and this is Gay in Rural France, a podcast where I talk about queer life in the countryside, mental health, and everything in between. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the podcast. Today I want to talk about a topic that is very close to my heart, and that is friendship, and friendship especially viewed from a queer perspective, but also from an expat perspective. So if you want to hear about my experiences and also my advice, then keep on listening or watching, and c'est parti, let's go guys. So I have again printed out a few cards to guide me through this discussion because I have prepared this in advance. So the first thing is, I think, to understand properly is how I define friendship today, because we all go through a journey in life, and I am 38 years old now as of today. And so I think for me by now, friendship means a deep connection with someone, a certain reliability, and shared values. And shared values is the biggest thing here. And I think it's not about quantity, it's about more finding people that really speak to you and that you can easily communicate with and that support you and your cause no matter what. And that's what I have found with my friends, my best friends, my kind of inner circle of friends. And I think sometimes living in a rural area can be quite tough in that respect, especially if you're moving after having lived in a city for long. And I grew up in a city, me personally. I never grew up in a rural setting. Always been living in a sort of big city when I was little, and then older, also working in theaters in like smaller cities, but always in a city environment. So I think in cities, people usually tend to, and that is my experience, be more open-minded about certain things, more kind of like drawn towards the left, at least in Europe or in Germany and France. That's what I have found. And that also like some right-wing beliefs or views are more settled in the countryside, which is not meant in any disrespectful or harmful way. It's just the way I have perceived it. And people, it's not that people are bad or anything. I think people just have different value sets and different beliefs, and I think they have not been in touch so much maybe with foreigners, with new situations, so they're a bit more secluded, so they might form different opinions about these kinds of topics and might lean more to the right. At least that has been my experience. That is my definition of friendship. So how friendships form and change over time. And I think that's a really big thing, and that's something that has been in my thought process for a longer period of time now, is that all my closest friends are from ballet, or like either from ballet school or from companies I danced with. And I think that is really important to mention, because we were all in the setting, especially in ballet school, where we were all teenagers, basically. We were kids and we were all living sort of together, and we were in this constant like non-supervised state, but also we had this shared passion for dance. We really wanted to do something. We were, I think growing up like this really forms very, very tight bonds. You also go through so many obstacles. You have a shared dream, shared values about the world, and your world is dance. And so it is a very tight-knit community, and that not only in ballet school, but also then later on in company life. And it depends a bit on the company. I've worked in big companies where we were like 40 plus dancers, and there it was obviously different because you have a lot of different characters and people in there. But also in smaller companies, I've found that smaller companies work more like big families. Like, you had 10 people, 9 other colleagues. And yeah, certainly there was colleagues that you might not be like super best friends with, but you were getting along usually with everybody, and you were quite close with everybody. So I think this sharing passions and struggling together actually forms very, very tight bonds. And two of my best friends are from ballet school still, and one of my best friends who I still work with is actually from the second company I worked in. So yeah, and we've been friends for a long, long time. And I think then in adult life it kind of shifts and changes, because for me work environment was very much like ballet school, like I said already, but in a normal working environment kind of shifts, and you don't spend as much time with your friends or with people who become your friends. So basically you don't spend a whole day together at university, hanging out, doing things, meeting after, everybody has sort of a life and their routines, and so it's much shorter time spans. So usually you don't really exchange as much, which is nothing bad. It's just the way life goes, and I think this way friendships start changing, which could also be different in a rural than a city setting, because I do see that a lot in rural settings, that people are still very much friends and spend a long, long time together, spend whole weekends together with one another. But I think it also is a bit like a character question. And yeah, I think forming a friendship and this bond just is different if you don't share like the dynamic of a day together. It is just that. It's very simple fact, actually. So that brings me to a queer perspective on friendship. And I mean, this whole channel is about being queer and being in a rural setting. And so I asked myself if all of my best friends are queer, and they're absolutely not. I think as a gay man, I was always drawn to have best girl friends. So most of my friends were girls. I was badly bullied in school, mostly by cis heterosexual men. And so I think for me, it was kind of the safe space. I grew up in a society in the 90s and the early 2000s where it still was lacking certain role models. Role models were appearing, and there were definitely more than before, but in no comparison whatsoever to today. And I am so glad that kids today have so much more role models to define themselves, to see how can I live my life, and just like, much more input about all these things. And this is just like such a blessing, and I wish I could have had that. But at the same time, it's just what it is. I'm not envious of today's generation. It's not at all. I am just extremely happy that everyone's out there, and that's why I am out there as well. I mean, I'm not sure if I have any younger audiences, but I think it's really important for us to be visible, and especially for the generations to come. So I think for my queer identity, and I outed myself when I was 15, I think I always felt very safe around like a girl environment. It was emotionally much more stable for me personally. And I have this until this very day, that I have a difficulty to identify with cis heterosexual men. I feel quite uncomfortable around them. It's hard for me to talk with them, which doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, it's fine. But I do experience that sometimes I feel a bit weird around the dudes, I just feel out of place. They don't make me feel very, very welcome, or very, I don't know, emotionally like supported. I don't feel like I want to open up around them. I feel very, but I think it's also from my side that I'm putting up this barrier between me and them because I've had just so many negative experiences that it's really hard for me to give cis heterosexual men a chance. I have to say, um, and I think taking from this, you can see that value driven friendships are for me more important than identity driven friendships. And I think if I had more open queer people back then in school, then I think I would have had much more queer friends now, but that didn't exist. Like literally, I would not know anyone else who went to school with me who was out at such an early age like me. So yeah, I was the center of attention. So yeah, this brings me to the point of staying connected across distances because my best friends are so far away, and it's horrible sometimes. It's really horrible, but I think what has been working for us really well is WhatsApp voice messages. And that's how I stay in touch with my very best friends. It's hard to call because, like, everyday life gets in between, and also just like daily routines. My day looks different than someone else's day. I don't have like very regular working hours. All my friends, or my two best friends, who I have been in ballet school with, they are not dancing, so they have regular jobs, which means they have more regular kind of working hours, which is totally different to me, where I have just like really weird, odd working hours. So I can just like spontaneously decide how I want to work and how I want to spend my day. So for me, it just really works much more to do the WhatsApp voice messages. Sometimes there are days where I feel like an emotional weight of them not being physically present. And I do envy some people who have their best friends physically present. I have never had that experience after ballet school and then in the company, obviously, where I met Katya, my other best friend, who I work with. But not to have them physically present. Sometimes it's hard because you would like to just be like, "Ugh, please, please." It's just totally different. Even if we talk on the phone, I mean, it doesn't replace like being there. I just spent a week in Germany, and I sat on the balcony with my best friend in her apartment, and it was just so nice. And then I was working with my other best friend, so it was just, yeah, these are the moments that I cherish so much and that I'm so thankful for having. But yeah, it can be tough. And a good example is also my other best friend, so that's the number three. So they just moved even further away in Germany, to the east of Germany, and they are renovating also a medieval house. And but they spent a week, 1.5 weeks here last summer, the end of summer, September. It was just so beautiful. It was so nice having them here. It was my best friend, her husband, and her two kids. And it was just like, yeah, I mean, it was exhausting because I'm not used to kids and having kids around, but at the same time, it was just like so exhilarating. And when they left, I just like broke out in tears, and I was like, I'm gonna miss you, because it's like, yeah, physically having them there and just like sharing, exchanging, hugging, it's just like, those are the people I love, these are my chosen family. And not having them physically close sometimes is not so easy. And I think yeah, it's really important to create those moments of physically being with one another as well, which also brings me to grieving friendships that end. And I think when you get into your 30s, even in your 20s, you start experiencing that when you move to a different city for university, for work, and so on. So that just life sometimes gets busy, and some friendships just fade, and that's okay as well. I think it's also okay to realize that some friends are not meant to be there forever, or some friends are meant to be there, but yeah, they kind of appear and reappear. And I think it's also okay that to acknowledge that. I have a very good friend who is literally like, she is visiting me every year here in France. She has been so supportive. We've always tried, like, we've known each other from work, from theater, and she was in the administrative part of theater when I was working there, and we befriended each other very quickly. And it's a really tight friendship, but we're not in contact all the time. So basically, we hear from each other maybe once a month, once every 2 months. But it doesn't change the quality of our friendship. And when she comes, it's just so really nice. And we already planned, like, she's gonna come in a few weeks, and already booked a stay on Ile de Ré, on our little peninsula island here close by. We're gonna go to the sea, and it's just gonna be super nice. And I just can't wait for this. But yeah, I think it's okay to have those kinds of friendships as well. You know, they're like up and down and up and down, and then some friendships fade and then they go back up. And I think I think with some friendships, you also, I had this experience in Düsseldorf. I had a friend who I adored. Like, she was so fun. She was so fun to be around. We really clicked. But she was so busy with her own life, and she already had so many friends that I think I just didn't fit in any of that. And I felt a bit disconnected and forgotten after some time, and it was sad for me. But I think it's important to grieve also for a friendship, and then it's important to go through all of this grieving pain, and then come out the end and realize, okay, it it was basically not the right time. It's a bit like any relationship. Basically, you have to realize that it always takes two. It's a combination of things, and sometimes, yeah, life just gets in the way, and you've got to accept it. And I think I'd rather go with the flow than go against the flow, especially in my private life, and create misery when I can create beauty. And yeah, that's my personal experience of what I have lived through in Düsseldorf. Actually, not only with her, but also with some other people that I really enjoyed having around. But somehow it just didn't work. It was just this typical adult friendship. And this also brings me that friendship to, I'm not making sense in English sometimes. It also brings me to friendships are meant to evolve, which is our second to last point for this podcast. And I think it's really important to know that friendships are not static, and just like everything around us, our planet is turning, our whole solar system is moving, every cell of our body is like constantly in movement. Everything outside is constantly in movement, even if it's just teensy tiny. So everything is like constantly changing, and I think that's the beauty. And I think that's also a big lesson for life, if you understand that nothing's static, everything's constantly changing, and it's beautiful and it's okay. And then I think you go through life much easier with that thought in mind, and not clinging on to something because it has been like this forever, or it has felt like this or like that. And I think it's okay to accept, and good to accept, and very healthy, that everything is constantly changing, and it's absolutely fine. So yeah, I think, especially as a queer person and like gay man who doesn't really want kids like me, just experiencing all this, like, all my best friends have kids now, and the first one got her kid at the age of 29, and that changed her rapidly. She was totally different before, and it's nothing bad, nothing, but you have to acknowledge that, yeah, just priorities change. My priorities also changed. I'm renovating this house, I'm doing all of this, so also my priorities have changed so much throughout the years. And that's what I mean with friendships are evolving. And I think as a queer person, sometimes it can be quite tough on you to be like, okay, now I'm just like pushed to the side because there's this kid or there's those kids. And I feel like that if you try to understand the opposite side as well, it can be quite frustrating for them as well, because it is a big change in your life. It is an impact on your life that suddenly there's a kid who needs to be taken care of, who needs you to survive, essentially. So sure, you're gonna make it your priority. It would be weird if you wouldn't, right? So I think everyone just carries their own struggles and burdens and things, and it's always easy to see your perspective, but it's always hard to like turn it around and be like, okay, maybe I just need to start looking at the other people's perspective and be, okay, these people also have things they need to deal with, problems, yada yada yada, and I am not the center of the universe. Unfortunately, no, just kidding. No, but it's like I think if you don't take yourself so important, then you'll be much happier. That's just my 5 pence, and I think once we let go of expectations and stay open to the change, we can actually have meaningful connections that survive all of these life-changing moments that we all experience. So lastly, I just want to give some advice on building friendships again after moving as well, because I mean, some of you also watch because I have moved to a rural area, or you're planning to move to France, or things like this. I think the single best advice that I can give is give it time, because real connections doesn't happen overnight. And I think if you can use existing networks, like I was very lucky that I had my boyfriend, that he integrated me really fast. But I think if you have already some kind of connection, you can build up on that connection, or find local groups, find people, like I said in the very beginning, that share your values. And I think that's really important. And I think it's also important to be open and approachable. I know that myself, I have a bit of social anxiety, and that might make me look like I'm not really approachable. But I think I'm very easy to open up. I try not to be a big mystery for people, because I find this is playing games, and this is a bit like, why should I be a mystery? It's like, I like you, I'm gonna tell you what's going on. If I like you. So for me it's that. For me it's very simple, and this might be too much sometimes for people. I also understand that, but I think if you want other people's trust, you also have to trust them. So if you are the first one to open up, eventually those people will also open up. And I think it's also about being kind to yourself, and about accepting that loneliness is normal, and it's not a personal failure or anything. It's just what it is. It's like, we all feel lonely. Even if we're surrounded by people, we can feel very, very lonely. And I think you should focus on quality over quantity, like I've already mentioned, and just find the people who make your life as enjoyable, as beautiful as they can. So I just want to end with a little quote. Friendships aren't static, they move, shift, and sometimes fade. But they also surprise us, grow in unexpected places, and root us even when we're far from where we started. And I think that's really beautiful. Thank you so much for listening or watching the video today. If you want to continue watching, there will be other videos around me, so just continue watching or listening. If not, I will see you next week for another episode of the podcast. Until then, it's bisous and au revoir from the southwest of France. Bye guys, have a lovely day or evening.